Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with another episode of Composer Chat, where I talk to other composers about their process, their work-life balance, and other fun things. In this episode, we're talking with J. Scott Rakozy. Now, if you don't know who Scott is, he's an incredible composer, but he also does sound design, ADR, pretty much anything in the audio music department. He's also a hilarious guy with a ton of energy and passion for what he does. Scott, what's going on, man?
Oh, just fine and dandy. How about yourself? What's with the latest and greatest and everything?
I thought it'd be cool to chat with him about his process, all the things that he does, and learn a little bit more about what it means to balance all of those jobs at the same time. I definitely recommend you stick around. We're going to talk about a lot of interesting concepts, and if you find the video helpful, I hope you'll leave a like and subscribe for more. I really appreciate you doing this, and I've seen like your stuff on Instagram, and I know you do like Olympic work and lots of different things. So like, do you want to like start by just chatting about like all the different things that you do?
Oh man, all the things that I do. I've kind of positioned myself as a Swiss Army knife as far as audio stuff goes. So I do everything from production audio. So I'll be the guy on set with the boom stuff, doing all the recording and everything on set and all that stuff. I'll do ADR stuff, so we'll do automatic dialogue replacements. So we'll go ahead, I'll work with like Netflix or Universal or Paramount, whatnot. Have the actors come in, we'll go ahead and do all their lines and everything, do those sessions. I've done the whole recording and mixing side of things where I'll record orchestras and bands and everything. So I've done stuff with like Valve and Arena.net and some other companies where we've recorded those orchestras, for all that fun stuff. In addition to that, also sound design. So like currently right now, I work with Avalanche Games. So we're working on the Hogwarts Legacy game,
nice.
where I'm doing sound design and music for that. And then music. And then doing music, doing all that fun stuff. So writing music, tons of music, all that good stuff. So
Do you have a favorite? Like of all the things you do you like doing all of? I'm sure you do like doing all of them, but like, if you had to pick your babies.
The funny thing is I always envy sound designers because I think honestly they're the most creative to just creating stuff. Even electronic artists, I guess, they just kind of create noise and sounds and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I love doing that, but I think music has always been a part of my life, ever since the age of 3. So it's like music will always transcend everything else. So it's like, okay, yeah, I love doing music. I'm really quick at it. I love doing it, writing it, all that fun stuff. So.
You are really quick at it from everything I've seen on Instagram. That's part of the reason why I connected with you too early was I was just like, I have such respect for people who are like hyper efficient with stuff and really organized. I'm like a super nerd about that stuff. So I was like, oh man, this guy's just like churning out music.
Oh,
like, yeah.
I don't know about that. No.
I mean, and it sounds great too. Like, I also like love when people have really good sounding mock-ups, and that was another thing that I was really drawn to with your stuff. I was just like, man, it sounds so good. I find it so inspiring.
Well, I mean, you're just as fantastic, man, if not better. I love the stuff that you've done, especially all the animation stuff. Like, oh my gosh,
I appreciate
that is an artwork in itself. Like the whole Mickey Mouse scene writing and everything. Like,
yeah, right.
That takes so much time and creativity and everything. So I would say props to you, man, for doing awesome work there. So
yeah, do you do any work for like animations? I mean, I think I saw you did some like web shorts, if I remember right, like a Star Wars one.
Oh yeah, that's right. All these projects start just like combining together, and so you're just like, oh, that's right. I forgot I worked on that project.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that was one of my first projects. Like when I started doing freelance full time, that was one of my first big ones. And I think that was like done in like a couple of days, writing the first 4.5 minutes, whatever. Because they had another guy, Jacob Cadmus, I think is his name. He did the rest of them. Yeah. And so Danny Ramirez, the director, was like, hey, let's bring you on board. Just do like this first part, make it all epic and everything. Had a ton of fun. But of course, it's writing John Williams. So, everybody knows John Williams' style is just like, it's a lot of fast moving parts that are going on.
Yeah.
And like, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like on top of the compositional chops, even just like the mock-up, getting the whole thing programmed. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty. Are you a cinematic studio user? I thought you were.
Cinematic. Oh yeah. That's like my entire template is nothing but cinematic studio stuff. Yes, all the woodwinds, all the strings, all the brass, and then I use Spitfire for all the percussion stuff.
Nice.
And then I'll go ahead and blend in some of the Spitfire symphonic strings, like the performance patches, with my cinematic studio stuff, just to have a different color. And
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm like a huge advocate. Yeah, I remember we were talking about the Winds, and I was like,
yeah.
I'm just obsessed with everything Cinematic Studio Series. It's just
I know.
so good. Plus, like the libraries blend so well together. It makes it so much easier to compose.
Yeah, because you can take one part from like your piccolo stuff, and it will translate extremely well into like your trumpet, you know. And it's just like you might have to change the articulation sets maybe just a little bit to make it all work. But like overall, like all the articulations are pretty much the same, especially like the staccato, staccatissimo, and sforzandos. Like those are, I think they're all the same length. So it's like. Super easy to just translate those into other instruments. You're like, oh man,
it just
Cinematic Studio.
It's just so good. Yeah, I remember I emailed them a couple months ago because I was like, I'm such a huge fan of their stuff. I'm like, can I do anything to help you guys? Because like I just love what you do. They're like, we're good, but here you go. Thank you. You know.
Well, I think they're working on their percussion stuff too.
Yeah,
if I remember correctly. So we'll see how that turns out. So.
I'm excited. One of the things I thought was super cool was their woodwinds are so responsive. With that the low latency. Like I'm hoping what they do is like take the strings and brass and pop that in there, because that would be like I think that would be a huge game changer. It's like really the only gripe people seem to have with the library is just getting over like the legatos. But
yeah, and that's the reason like I love the Spitfire performance patches, because those are all real time, no latency whatsoever. But yeah, I totally agree with you with the Cinematic Studio stuff like that 3 millisecond whatever delay. Yeah, I just kind of just get used to it, like, whatever.
That's what I was going to say. Is like, yeah, do you play... Because I used to try and avoid playing it, but now I'm kind of used to it, and I just have a marcato and a legato and just deal with it.
Exactly, yeah. I'll just play it in real time, just like, all right, and they'll just nudge everything over,
Right.
I'm like, okay, that did it.
Do you quantize avidly or not so avidly?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I do too.
I make sure everything is stuck to it. Just in case, if you had to hand it off to an orchestrator, if they're cleaning up all your mess and everything, like, it's so much work for them. So it's like, let's just have it straight to the bar and everything.
Yeah.
Just to make it easier on them. And also for me, like, I like having everything all nice and tidy. I know some people are like, but you have to humanize it a little bit. Like, does the average listener really care?
That's, and like, I've talked with people about that too, because I've like debated with people, and like, I also quantize like literally everything. Yeah. And I feel like that debate is changing because samples have slight delays in them anyway and slight imperfections. So you're going to get those imperfections even if stuff's hard quantized, even between different libraries. Like different percussion libraries might have slightly different delays on the onset, Yeah,
it's totally true. What was I going to say? Just having, and also just the characteristics as well. Like, every player's different, right? And so you're still going to have that little nuance, that humanistic performance, as opposed to like, they don't come in all at the same time, or they do, and it just sounds very robotic. It comes down to the samples generally. So
right. I think it's awesome that you do so many different things, and that's how do you balance doing that? Like, do you split your days up where you're doing composing one day and then sound design another, or
it's generally a project per project kind of basis. So like currently right now I'm full time with Avalanche Games, so like all my time is dedicated to doing all the Wise integration, the Unreal Engine, working with the blueprints, putting all the nodes in and everything, making sure it works and it's triggering, in the game and everything. So a lot of the time is spent doing that while also doing the sound design and the music and throwing it in there and make that all work. When I was freelancing, it was a per project basis. So like I'll get called up by a client and be like, hey, we got, here's a good example, like Devin Supertramp. So Devin Graham called me up yesterday, and he's got 2 projects in the works that we got to get done, one in 2 weeks from today and another one in February. And so I will kind of base my time outline out where I'm like, okay, I'll go ahead and do like 2 hours doing this project, and if there's another project that has a higher priority, then I'll get going on that right away. And for the most part, like a lot of these are pretty quick and easy things to do, so it's not going to take a whole lot of time. Except for the Devin Supertramp projects, those take quite a bit.
Okay.
Just because it's like wall to wall music, and so like this one project is 8 minutes long, and so it's gonna be 8 minutes of music, and so generally, yeah, if I had an entire day, I could write it and get it done in about 2 days. But since my time is eaten up doing full time audio work, now I have to divvy it out where it's like, okay, I can spend about 2 hours today, maybe 2 hours tomorrow night, another 2 hours next night, kind of do that, so I'm not getting burnt out. So
right, yeah, because that's, I think, the challenge is sometimes with like at least with my schedule, it's like when stuff hits, it like really hits.
Yeah.
And it's like sometimes I wish you could just like take those crunches and just space them out a little bit. So it's like, so I don't have like, 3 gigs simultaneously followed by 2 weeks of no work.
Yes, that's such a true thing of like when it rains, it pours, especially as a freelancer. Like I'll have sometimes like a dry spell for like a month where I'm just kind of like just working on library music, where I'll just write some stuff, send it off to a publisher and whatnot. But then I'll just get smacked with like 3 big projects back to back to back, and you're like, where was this like the previous month?
Right? I would have taken that then.
Exactly. So there's always that balance, of like. And of course, I always try to do it within an 8-day or an 8-hour day. Because it's just one of these things that I learned from my mentors, like Lyle Moore, who like that's his thing. He does like 8 hours. He'll get done at 5 o'clock. He'll step out of his studio and spend time with his family and everything.
Oh, dude, that's awesome.
And like that is like so pertinent as a freelancer, because my other mentor, Sam Carden, I've heard stories where he'll stay up till like 3, 4 in the morning. One time he like got himself so burnt out working nonstop for like 2, 3 days straight that he was just exhausted, where the ambulance came and everything.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
So, so there's always this balance of like, okay, once it's 5 o'clock, I'm out of the studio, don't have to deal with any of the work or anything. But now since I'm full-time and balancing the freelancing, now it's like, now I gotta like dip into my evenings, and it's like, okay.
But at least I think at least you recognize, like I try to do the same thing, and just knowing that boundary exists, I feel like is really important, because there's a lot of people that don't, and like, I'm really passionate about this subject too, because I'm here in LA, and I know a lot of people who, I don't know if you went to college for film scoring or if you... Okay, you did. So what? Like, did you? Because I didn't. I went for classical composition, and so
okay.
Yeah, interestingly, my entry, like I've always wanted to do commercial. I even in college was writing commercial music, but everybody was like, huh. But it's funny because I feel like I had a bit of distance from some of the more academic elements, and like I know a lot of people I know out here talk about how like. It's kind of like they'd push you to do like an assistant gig for someone for a period of time. And I feel like there's, not with every assistant gig, but there's like some cultures that get perpetuated about like, at all costs, get the job done. And it's just, it seems like it's a really dangerous circle you can get pulled into,
Yeah, especially when you're first starting off. Like, I understand. I mean, I was in that same area as well of like, I need to get every gig. I got to go ahead, regardless of what the pay was. Like, oh, you need 8 minutes of music, but you only have $100. Oh, okay, sure, I'll do it.
Right.
And it's like you said, it's extremely dangerous. And I've learned from other friends and whatnot, like, you'll find clients that will pay you what you're worth. And that's the thing. It's like understanding your value. And that's one of the things I have learned over the years of freelancing. It's like understanding my value and like taking gigs that I want to do as opposed to I need to do or I have to pay the bills or something. And it's been kind of weird where these clients will actually pay my rates, whereas some of these other ones are like, we don't have a whole lot of money. Yeah. But if I love the project enough, I will do it.
Sure,
regardless.
right.
Like I'll do it just because I'm all about establishing, getting relationships, working with these people, collaborating, making friends with all these wonderful, talented directors and producers. Because you never know, later down the road, they might have a huge project, like, hey, we actually have the funds to pay you for this. But you'll eventually find the ones that just don't care, where they're just like, we'll just pay you, like half your rate or something, or even less than that, for this big project. And then you start deciding, like, okay, I don't have to do this.
Yeah,
But at the
right.
very beginning, yes, I feel like everybody that's starting off doing this career, they just clamoring to get at every project they can get, which is understandable. I get it. You know, they want the experience. That's really the biggest thing, is getting that experience. But eventually you're going to find out, like, you're going to get burnt out. You know?
Yeah.
And it's not going to be worth it, you know?
It's
so finding
ironic,
that
right?
balance.
Like, I feel like people do this job because they're trying to escape. They're like, I don't want to work like a 9-to-5 desk job, and then you're working like a 50-hour, 60-hour desk job. It's like, there's this. It's funny. Did you ever see the movie Soul?
Oh, yeah.
The Pixar one?
Yep.
There was that scene that it just like struck me so hard, where they were in like the subconscious land or whatever, and they were talking about people who have like essentially lost their soul, and it was it was like showing the desk the guy working like finance or something, but then it also showed like an artist and saying like people who are like, if you're like almost you want it too much, you sometimes lose sight of like the things that kind of sustain you, like you're talking about like just not burning out and maintaining like personal physical health. Like it's so important to say sustainable, I think, in this industry, because ultimately, like, we're the car, like we're the vessel. So it's like, if you're not taking care of yourself, like, it's hard to continue to do this.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's my wife always makes fun of me because, like, when I was freelancing, like, I would literally roll out of bed, 8 in the morning. I'll go ahead and do an hour bike ride up the canyon or whatnot, come back, eat some brunch, and then start work at 12, and then get done at 5, and still pull in like $5,000,
Yeah,
in a day.
right.
So it's I don't know.
I think that's kind of reassuring to hear you say that, because I do that too sometimes. I'm like, I feel like I should be getting up earlier, but like, it's, I think the other thing too is I feel like externally, like, people like to. It seems like culture rewards people who work long hours, but I think actually it's like you can really stay sustainable if you try and be smarter with your time instead of just working more,
Yep. Yeah. And that's so true. Because, everybody feels like, oh, I put in like 80 hours this week, and everybody feels like, oh, that's so incredible and everything. But then you look at, like, I've been looking at all these accounts about, like, financial freedom and like what's more important, either your time, and that's usually the biggest thing, is everybody wants their time. You look at like that one meme where it's like, what is it? It's like a baby has no money, what was it? Like no money, no physical like fitness or whatnot, but they've got time because they're they're a baby. And then when they get older, like in their in their 30s whatnot, now they got money, but they don't have time, but they got their physicality. And then when they got older, then they've got all the money in the world, but they don't have enough time. They don't have their physicality, and so it's like that whole idea of like time is so essential. And I feel like a lot of these people get sucked into their work, into their jobs, whether they like it or not, I don't know. But it's like you're so focused on that as opposed to more important things. Like, is time more important to you? Is family more important to you? Is your hobbies, your passions, your love more important than this job? If you're saying yes to a lot of those things, then you got to reevaluate what the heck are you doing at this job,
Oh, dude, it's so, and even like just people who like defer, like people who are like saving for retirement or whatever. Like, obviously, like it's like saving is a great thing, but like when it comes at the cost of your happiness, and I think ironically even artists do that a lot. Like what we're talking about, like they'll take gigs that they might not even have an interest in simply because they think it's a great thing for the future, and and it's like you can do that a couple times in select areas, but I think like being very selective and thoughtful about those decisions is really important, instead of just impulsively like yes, and then you're just like you have no time. Plus, I like I've been reading this book, Essentialism. I don't remember if we talked about it on Instagram. Do you know that book?
That sounds very familiar, but I don't think I've never read it, so I don't know.
Oh man, you probably love it. It's so good. It's kind of about this, like about really being highly selective about what you do, because the whole idea he's saying is that like there's like a success paradox where like as people get successful because they're really good at a handful of things. And then as they're good at that, like other people approach them and ask them to do a number of more things. And then suddenly like it grows and grows. And then you're like the go-to guy for all this stuff. And then after a while, like you're starting to lose the ability to become really good at what you do.
Oh,
yeah. And so like the paradox is that like the thing that makes you successful is the thing that can actually undermine your success as you grow.
Oh.
And it's like it just blew my mind because I'm like, and even just like because I do copyist work, orchestration, composition. I make YouTube videos. I teach. And like I enjoy.
That's a lot on your plate, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're doing a ton of stuff, but like as you know, it's like it's hard to maintain all of it all the time. So it's like my solution now has been like trying to determine the stuff I really want to be doing, and then like I outsource little bits and pieces elsewhere. And it's like so, even if I lose some money like doing it, it's just so freeing because I can just focus on so many less things, you know?
Yep. I'm so glad you mentioned the whole outsourcing thing because I feel like a lot of composers feel like they have to have their hands on everything. Everything they work on, they have to touch. And I used to be that same way where it's like, yes, I would write the music, then I have to orchestrate it, and then I have to send it off, and then make sure I'm at the recording studio and everything and all that fun stuff. But now it's like, no, over the years of teaching at BYU, doing the film scoring and the orchestration classes and everything, I've now got students. I'm like, hey, I don't want to do this work. Do you want to do it?
Yeah, right.
So,
and it's kind of a win-win, right? It because
it is.
Everybody gets work. People get work, and you get to focus on what you want to do.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I feel like a lot of successful people come to realize like they don't have to be a part of every single process. Where they can outsource their stuff. Like, sure, I love mixing everything, but it's like sometimes I don't want to, so I'll send it off to a mixing engineer. Or like I don't want to do the orchestration. I've already written the music, let's send it off to an orchestrator, have them do all the work. Because it's like it's all that time versus money and everything. So it's like I will give you money to free up my time.
Yeah, exactly. And like where your value is best contributed, I think, is like usually a very specific area. Like I know I saw an interview with John Powell, and he was talking about like how he has his assistants, like, he'll say, can you take this theme and orchestrate this as a brass thing? Like, of course, like he could do it, but by getting his assistant doing it, it's like two parts. Like he can make him, he was saying, I think the thing that really blew my mind was like, he can make a more objective decision on if something works or doesn't because he hasn't invested all the hours of time into it. So,
that's so smart.
He can just be like, yeah, that doesn't work. Whereas if he put 20 hours in, he'd probably be inclined to, want it to work almost.
Yeah.
So it's in a way he becomes a better decision maker. And ultimately that's, I guess when you're at that point, that's really, you're getting paid to like tell a story with your music. You're not necessarily getting paid to split out all the trumpets,
Yeah, exactly.
Like macro
you're not
and micro.
doing the grunt work. You're just like, you're the audio lead. You're kind of focusing, like you said, like focusing on the story side of the music, how it's going to be shaped and everything. You're just managing at that point,
Yeah. So. I love that stuff. I'm glad you're into that too. I'm actually curious too, like, because everybody has a different kind of like story into this, but like, how did you get to this point, like the point that you're at now? Because you sound like you're super busy. You're doing a lot of different projects. People are reaching out to you, which is always kind of a surreal thing in this industry when people you're like, me? So like, how do you think you got to this point? What do you think you did, or who helped you along the way?
Man, that's a really good question.
I know it's a hard question.
Because I've grown up and everything with music in my life and all that fun stuff. And there's been pinnacle moments throughout that whole adventure of where like my choir director back in high school was like, hey, I see something in you. Let's get your parents in. Let's have you sit down. And the first thing she was like, we got to get your kid a computer. Get him into like some sort of writing software, some sort of thing like that. And that's when I ventured into getting my first iMac G5 back in 2005 and getting a GarageBand and learning how to actually do all this stuff. Because before all that, I had like this Casio keyboard and I kind of learned like MIDI stuff on that, but it wasn't like I could save it or anything. I don't know. I just didn't know how to do that. But with a computer and everything, it's like, okay, this is like diving into learning how to do MIDI stuff, how to do automation. Like, how do I make my strings sound realistic with GarageBand strings, you know?
How old were you when you were doing this?
I was 17 doing that.
Oh man, that's really young
Yeah.
to like start focusing, because like I started young too, but I had no idea what I was doing in like DAWs.
Well, man, I was right there with you. Like, I had no idea what was going on. I was like, I just want to get ideas down. Just want to start writing, just figuring this stuff out, you know?
Yeah.
And then I went to BYU, Idaho, 2006. And then that's when I started discovering like virtual instruments. I was like, oh, virtual instruments, like they're actual separate things as opposed to like being a part of a DAW or something.
Yeah.
And so, you know, learning about all that stuff. And then I picked up Logic Express, which was like the in-between of GarageBand and Logic Pro. And diving into all that. But it actually wasn't until like BYU Provo here in Utah where I got to meet up with one of my mentors, Sam Carden. You know, if you guys don't know who Sam Carden is, he works with Blizzard. He's done a lot of the Blizzard shorts, all the animated shorts over there.
Oh, cool.
And helped with the main theme song for Overwatch and all that. Anyway, he kind of took me under his wing. It's like, hey, you got some chops, you got some great stuff. Let's like get you going, get you pumping out some more stuff. And so he kind of took me under his wing, kind of started doing like the whole library music scene, kind of getting, you know, in touch with publishers like Warner Chappell and Phoebe Zoo and a couple of others, and just introducing me to other people, like Lyle Moore, for example. Lyle Moore, he's done tons of trailer stuff, but he's most famous for his ESPN theme for the NBA. That's like his big moneymaker, and also Judge Judy. He also did that whole theme, and that's
cool.
like his cash cow, like right there.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But anyway, so with all of that, also came like this love of like just sound in general. So like I had all these different people at college that kind of put me in the right directions of like how to do post-production audio, how to do production audio and all that stuff. And so that's kind of how I got going. And then eventually you start making connections. You know, that's the whole point, at least that I found at work, you know, being at BYU, was making connections.
Right.
And so one of the first connections was through Sam Carden, who's like, hey, they're having assistant composer positions available at Blizzard. Like, I can hook you up, see, get you going down there and everything. And so I did the whole process, all that stuff. And they wanted me to come on board, but at the same time, I had also interviewed at a new studio in downtown Salt Lake City called Huge Studios. And there's a bunch of top-notch players over there. Like, we got Mike McDonough, who's worked with Ben Burt, you know, the whole sound design stuff. And then we had Chance Thomas, who's a renowned video game composer for like the last 20, 30 years or whatever. And then some other people as well. And I went with them, mostly because they offered a lot more stuff, not only like pay, but also like I would be on the forefront of sound designing, of ADR stuff, voiceover, sound, you know, mixing, recording, all that stuff over at Huge Studios. And that was my love. That's what I wanted to do. So going over there, that's really where I got my chops and my skills and everything of like how to do Foley stuff, you know, how to do an orchestra, like how to do all the mic positions, all that fun stuff, running the Neve board, all that great stuff. But then the funny thing is after about a year and a half being there, my boss was running a $200 million Ponzi scheme. And
oh, jeez.
Yeah, it was
funny.
Yeah, exactly. So we were all just completely devastated by this whole thing. Like, are you kidding me? Because he was not only in charge of Huge Studios, but he had a bunch of other entities and everything, a bunch of other companies under this umbrella. And so the feds came in, shut down everything. We were all out of a job.
Crap.
Yeah, so this is kind of like the downfall. You know, it's like, whoa, shoot. You know, this is like the moment of like, do I dive into freelancing full time? Like, do I do this whole thing like that, or do I like find another job and supplement my passion or something? And luckily my wife was very supporting, like, no, just go for it, just do it. And so that first year, it was a little rough getting started and everything, but with the connections and everything from Huge Studios, a lot of those clients I kept in touch. And so I was able to work on some projects with them over that first year. And so I was able to like come in and do like, do all the recording stuff for the High School Musical show on Apple Plus.
Cool.
Because they film it all here, in Sandy. And then what else was there? Like I helped out with like some Power Rangers stuff, like some ADR sessions for that. Tencent, the huge video game company, helped out with a lot of the recordings for that, for Hex and the audio.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
I'm trying to think what else. But anyway, so that entire year was like just trying to get momentum going. So that first year, it's like, not I'm going to be just completely, transparent with like pay and everything. Like I brought in like 35,000 take home pay, which is not a lot. That's like, all right, that first year, and that's usually the case. The first year is always going to be kind of rough with the startup costs and everything, trying to get clients. And so the next year, I was like, all right, we're gonna see if I can double that. And so I did. I made about $88,000 the next year. And that was just bigger clients and everything. And then last year, I was like, all right, I'm going to push myself, see if I can find more clients, ones that pay me more. And then I broke the 6-figure barrier last year.
Dude, heck yeah.
So it's like, and now I'm just like doing the whole Hogwarts Legacy and doing this. Like, this is my dream job.
Yeah.
Like, doing video game music, doing video game sound design, diving into the trenches and everything. Like, I am loving this.
That is so incredible. Like, and what about like, because I think that is so cool to hear the story of like you working for something and then a moment where it's like, is this it? And then having to kind of find your footing again. Like, and I totally relate to like I've kind of done the freelance thing forever because I was at a classical conservatory. So kind of when I graduated, they were kind of like, well, good luck.
Well, yeah, like now what,
like off you go. So, and I think one thing that I always think is interesting is like, when people tell their stories, it can seem very linear and almost obvious. What it's like, oh yeah, well that makes sense that he did this. Were there things that you remember trying that just totally bombed?
Man, everything was so new.
It's funny because you don't always see it that way as a freelancer. You're like, well, nothing was a failure, but like, I'm sure there were a bunch of places where you tried that kind of you hit dead ends that aren't as obvious in the story.
Man, that's a really good question. Because I think the biggest thing for my success was just me as a person, just my personality and everything. Like, these clients love working with me, because it's like they just want to have fun. Like they're all creative, so we're all creative. So like we're all collaborating and everything. Like, oh yeah, you want to do this cool idea? Let's figure it out. Let's do it.
Yeah.
But I don't remember any particular moment where like, I dropped the bomb on that. Except for one. There's one time I did drop the bomb, and that was I had done. It was like a Christmas album. And I was the recording engineer. I'd done all the recording stuff and everything. And I had done everything except for one of the things I had missed, like adding an extra stereo track for the room-wide microphones, and I forgot that. Yeah, that was kind of a bummer.
That's stressful.
But the thing was like I finished up the recording and everything, and then I headed off to the Grand Tetons to go camping and everything. And the entire time, my friend Mike Green, he was like, hey, do you have those files and whatnot for us to like get everything all taken care of and everything? I'm like, oh yeah, I've already cleaned them up and everything. But he had already gone ahead and picked up the files off the hard drive, and they weren't all cleaned up, renamed, or the files reconsolidated or anything like that. But I already had done all that back at home, and so I hadn't given those off to the client. And so I got I got a really, really, really stern email from him.
Dang. I mean, it happens. It happens. I've had gigs like that, absolutely too. But I guess it's just inevitably part of. I think sometimes that stuff hurts more because like you are the creative head of your company, or it's like if you work at a job and you're an employee and you screw up, it's like it happens. But I think it's. I mean, one thing I think is really cool about you, man, is like you sound like you've really pushed yourself hard on a lot of fronts, like creatively and also like financially, but also balancing your personal life. And you also seem really passionate about everything still. Like you just, I feel a lot of passion from you, which I think is really awesome, because a lot of people, like, I think when they push themselves far in any one of those directions, they can actually lose that passion along the way, getting so fixed. How do you think you balance the two, like these business goals, but also just like staying loose?
The thing is like, it always goes back to that, the saying, like, if it's not a job if you love what you're doing, right? And
right.
that's really what it comes down to. Like, I absolutely love what I'm doing. And it's, like my wife, she's a programmer, a software developer. And so she does coding and everything. But I mean, her job is not like where she works is not like that much fun, right?
Sure. Right.
But she loves doing the coding side of things. She just hates all the corporate stuff on top of it.
Yep.
Whereas like me as being a freelancer and everything, it's like I get to do all this fun stuff, and it's always something new and exciting. I think that's the thing. It's like as long as it's challenging me and pushing me, I will always find a love for that. Obviously, there's some gigs where it's like, hey, can you do like some more corporate music stuff? And it's like, okay, how do I rewrite corporate music again?
Right.
But for like this Olympic album thing that I did last year, like that was extremely challenging because it's like, all right, we want you to write, 5 tracks that sound like John Williams. Like we want you to go for that vibe. We also want to do like 5 tracks that are like ESPN style. How do you make that? What are some ideas for that? And then like 5 tracks of like hybrid orchestral epic music. Like, okay, how do you do that? Make that all sound great and awesome. So that was a fun challenge there. And then of course on the top of that, the sound design stuff, like that will always fascinate me.
Yeah.
Just learning how do people like create these sounds and whatnot, and then put them in the game and see like how they all translate and everything.
Dude, it's amazing. Like I'm trying to picture being capable of doing all of those things at the same time, and it kind of blows my mind, to be honest. Like I know people who kind of like will. Like I've done sound design limited in the past, but like the learning curve for some of these things is so steep for me that it's just like, I just think it's so, I also was curious too, like, do you find that being able to do multiple things in the audio world helps you sort of get gigs in like for example, doing sound design work helps you get composing gigs in that department?
Yeah, actually, that was the funny thing with like this Hogwarts Legacy thing. I was brought on as a senior sound designer. And like I even told my boss and everything. I was like you brought me on as a senior sound designer because he asked me multiple times like, hey, would you want to do music for the game? And like here I am like my inner side of me is like, of course I do. Yes, I would love to. But I'm like, well, I'm brought on as a sound designer, so like put me wherever you need me to put, So like, yeah, we'd like to have you do music for. I'm like, yes, all right, excellent.
That's sick. Yeah. I think it must be because of trust, right? That it's like, it doesn't really matter what the gig is. If they have a good working relationship with you, then they'll just, that's the other thing too, I've been talking to people about. It's like, I notice sometimes people are trying to focus more on like trying to find like a niche and like being really adamant about it. It's like you were talking about too, like, it's really just about having a solid relationship with the person you're working with. Because then at that point, they'll trust you with a lot more things than you having to kind of push your experience at them.
Yep. Yeah, it's totally true. And I totally agree with you. Like, I feel like, especially like in the most recent years, I feel like there's a big push of like doing your niche and everything, like focusing on that. Where my success really just comes from like, just like establishing these relationships and then being trusted to do all facets of the entire audio production. Like last year I had worked on a short film with Matt Heyde, and I was at the very forefront. Like I did all the production audio, so I was on set for all those days, doing like we were up to like 6 in the morning, 9 in the morning or whatnot, doing 12, 14-hour days, just booming everything, getting all this because I knew what I want, like I knew what I needed to get. And so now I could take all that stuff, pull it into Pro Tools, go ahead, do do all the dialogue stuff, do all the Foley stuff, do all the cloth and footsteps and everything, go ahead and do the music on top of that, and then deliver it out, in 5.1 or whatever. And it's just because we already had this established relationship and everything.
Right.
Because not only him, but like a bunch of these other people that were on set, like I had worked on other projects with them. And so they already all knew me, and like they already knew like, oh man, he's so much fun to work with, like we're on board and everything. So
yeah, and it's probably a breath of fresh air too, I think, like because you're energetic and passionate. Like I'm sure you've seen not everybody's like that in this industry. It's funny.
That's true,
like,
yeah.
I think people have the impression that like all artists are going to be like super happy and passionate because they're doing what they love, but like I I mean, fortunately, the people I work with are like that.
Oh,
but I
good.
have also seen a lot of people who aren't, and
Yeah.
you're like, wow, you're doing music for a living? Because I would never, just based on the disposition, I wouldn't guess that. You know, it's interesting, but I think that I think that bringing that kind of energy and passion. I mean, I try to be that way too, and I think it really, you know, like you said, people want to work with people who are fun to be around.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, and that's really, I think that's the biggest reason for my success is people just love. I mean, not only because I'm talented, I guess, and able to like produce what they want, but they just love working with me. Like we love collaborating, and that's really what it is. Because like you're working on these, especially passion projects, like those are always my favorite projects to work on. They pay the least, but I love working on them because they're passionate about what they're doing, and like the end product and everything is always much more enjoyable than another talking head video or something. I don't know.
Yep. No, it's so true. And it's just, I think like it's just finding the balance between the two and recognizing that like you just because something pays more doesn't mean it's like more creatively fulfilling. Yeah. And just because something pays less doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. It's like finding that, because like I've done different types of gigs, and like I'm recently doing like those Flash Gets YouTube videos, which you know like relative to like some of the other composing gigs I do, like pay a lot less. But I am having so much fun on them that it's like I don't care. It's fine. I'm good with it, and I think too, like, yeah, having those things to sustain you. If you were just following the money trail all the time, every time, I think that's probably when you start to lose sight of like why you're doing something in the first place. You know, I had one more question, which is I guess backpedaling a bit, but you do so many different things. However, you said you also generally, I'm sure it's not always, but generally try to keep a regular schedule. I'm trying to figure out how that's possible, given like that, you know, like I know as a composer, like sometimes you get these crunches and deadlines, but I'm sure it's stacked on if you're doing sound design and music and, you know, ADR and stuff like that, or whatever else you do in that department. Do you like put restrictions in place in front of clients to be like, listen, I try to work this schedule, so this is how we're gonna do it? Or how do you approach that?
Generally I know my limitations. I know where I will exceed, and so I could give my clients a broad idea of like, oh, this style of music, you need this done. And I always ask them, like, what's your time frame? Like, what's the deadline and everything? And they'll be like, oh, we can get it done, like, in 2 weeks from now. And I always tell them, like, that's it? That's all you need? Like, I get this done, like, by tomorrow, you know?
Yeah.
So generally, I already know, like, okay, for this style of music, I can get this done in 4 hours. I can do a minute and a half of music in this style in 4 hours, get this sent off, and bam, we'll be done. And so, like, I will always gauge that, you know, and luckily my clients will understand. There have been a few cases where it's like, hey, like, because their client needs it done. But I like, for example, I had done this Fast and the Furious promo and with Devin Supertramp, and the client wanted it done like Monday or something like that, like in 3 days. And so it was like 8 minutes of music, you know, back-to-back music that I had to write. So it's like, okay, obviously, like I want to keep this relationship going and everything. Like I love working with Dev and everything. I will make this happen. And so there will be the occasional, you know, thing like that where like, okay, I'll make the exception just because I love this project. I love this client. Like I'll make that work. But for the most part, like, yeah, like I'll tell them like once it's 5 o'clock, I'm out. Like once it's the weekend, I don't do any work on the weekend, and I'll tell them that.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, that's cool to hear you say that.
Yeah, and they respect that. That's the crazy thing. It's like, all right, cool, yeah, that's fine. Like we'll get to it on next Monday. You know,
that's the thing, dude. Right? Like people think that that's gonna create a wall between the clients, but it's not. It's actually just establishing boundaries.
Yeah,
it's just
you gotta have that respect for each other. You know.
Yeah. So. Yeah, 100%. I've been on gigs like that too now, where I tell people, I'm like, just so you got a heads up, like, you know, if they want to like do a call or something on Saturday, I'm like, yeah, I can take a call, just so you know, I don't usually work on the weekends, but and then they're like, oh, no problem, so sorry. And like, yeah, it's I think that's kind of my hunch of what your answer would be too. It's like you can establish enough boundaries gently that, Especially if you establish them early, I think. It's
Yes,
hard to
yes.
backpedal and be like, I don't work on weekends, but I've worked on weekends for you for the last 8 gigs. Like,
yeah.
You know? Yeah. I think that's awesome, man. Well, this has been so awesome. We should definitely do this again, like even off camera. This is super cool chatting with you, dude. And like, I love your energy, as it sounds like a lot of people do. I think it's so awesome that you are at the point you're at doing so much stuff and like still loving it. So, I mean, props to you, dude. I think that's incredible.
And I feel like for future composers and everything, it's like, just do it, you know, just have fun, you know, if you love it, just go for it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that was the point. It's like when the rug was swept underneath me and like just going into a full front, you know, doing the whole freelance thing. I loved it. I still love it, you know, and that's the thing. It's like, you know, you look at these composers that, you know, like John Williams, you know, Hans Zimmer and whatnot, they're like in their 70s and 80s and, you know, crunching up to 90 years old, still writing. Like, this will never die. Like, that love and everything will keep going. Whereas most people, they work till they're 65, 67, then retire, you know? But like with this is like an integral part of us, like of our soul and everything, who we are, like this whole music and everything. And so we'll keep writing until we die. You know,
I have no retirement plans. I always tell my wife Nat, I'm like, I literally don't know what I would do. I'd probably go crazy if I wasn't sitting in front of a DAW. I think that's awesome, man. That's great advice. And yeah, Scott, I really appreciate your time, man. This is so awesome.
Well, thank you, Zach. I loved every minute of it. And yeah, let's do it again soon.
So that's going to do it. Again, Scott, thanks so much for coming on. This was so much fun talking to you. And we're definitely going to nerd out more behind the scenes about more techie stuff. But I hope you found this helpful. If you did, leave a like, subscribe for more. Maybe let me know who you'd like me to chat with next. And as always, I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you in the next video.